All right, today we're talking about the consolidated B-24 Liberator. It was a heavy bomber from World War II that was just full of contradictions. I mean, it was a record breaker, a total workhorse, a real piece of technology. And yet, for the guys who actually flew it, it was often their second choice.
So, let's just start with a number. 18,500. Any guesses what that is? It's not bombs dropped, it's not missions flown. No, it's something way, way bigger than that.
That is how many B-24s were built. Just think about that for a second. It is the most produced American military aircraft of any kind ever. We're talking more B-24s than any other heavy bomber, any other multi-engine plane. The scale is just, well, it's staggering.
And that's where we get to the heart of the matter, the big paradox of the Liberator. Even with all those incredible production numbers, it always seemed to be living in the shadow of its rival, the B-17 Flying Fortress. You see, the generals, the guys on the general staff, they love the B-24 for its performance. But the crews, the guys who had to fly it into combat, they often wished they were in the other plane.
So in this explainer, that's what we're going to dig into. We'll look at this unloved record breaker, its radical but kind of flawed design, its role as a workhorse in literally every theater of the war, all the different hats it wore, and finally, we'll try to unpack its really complex legacy.
Okay, so first things first, let's talk about the plane itself. The B-24's story really starts with its design, which was brand new, full of cutting-edge ideas. But as we're about to see, every single one of those innovations, it came with a price.
The secret sauce for the B-24 was its wing. It was called the Davis wing, and this long, skinny airfoil was incredibly efficient. It's the reason the Liberator could fly faster, go farther, and carry a bigger bomb load than the B-17. Honestly, this wing right here was the #1 reason the generals ordered so many of them.
And the innovation didn't stop with the wings. No way. The B-24 was the first American bomber to have modern tricycle landing gear. Its deep, flat-sided body earned it that nickname, the Flying Boxcar, and man, it could hold a ton of bombs. And check this out, its bomb bay doors were like a roll-top desk, a really clever design to cut down on drag.
But here's the trade-off, and you can see it plain as day on this chart. On paper, the B-24 wins, hands down. It's faster, has longer range, carries more bombs, but look at those bottom two rows. That's the other half of the story. The B-17 was tough, more robust. It could take an incredible amount of damage and still limp home. The Liberator, on the other hand, was less forgiving. It was notoriously tough to fly, especially at low speeds or if you lost an engine.
For the 10-man crew squeezed inside, these weren't just design quirks, they were real-world problems. The fuel system leaked so often that crews would fly with the bomb bay doors slightly open just to air out the fumes. And to get from one end of the plane to the other, you had to walk across a treacherous 9-inch wide catwalk right over thousands of pounds of explosives. It was a very demanding and very dangerous place to be.
But you know, even with all those flaws, its amazing performance meant it was in high demand. So the B-24 got sent everywhere. It became the go-to workhorse for the Allied Air Forces, and it served in every single theater of the war.
You could argue its most critical contribution was in the Battle of the Atlantic. The B-24's incredible range was the only thing that could close the gap, that dangerous patch in the mid-Atlantic where German U-boats were sinking ships without any resistance. These very long-range Liberators, packed with radar and depth charges, completely changed the game. They're credited with sinking 93 U-boats.
Over the skies of Germany, the B-24 was an absolute beast. Flying out of England with the 8th Air Force and Italy with the 15th, Liberators were the backbone of the bombing campaign. For a big chunk of 1944, if you looked up at one of those massive bomber formations, pretty much every other plane you'd see was a B-24.
And that brings us to Operation Tidal Wave, probably the B-24's most famous and infamous mission. A force of 177 Liberators was sent on this incredibly daring, treetop-level raid to destroy Hitler's main oil fields in Romania. But a navigational mistake threw the whole attack into chaos. The crews pressed on anyway, flying straight into a wall of anti-aircraft fire. They got the job done, but it was brutal. 54 planes lost. It was a costly success to say the least.
But here's the thing, the B-24 wasn't just a bomber. That big, modern airframe turned out to be incredibly adaptable, and it wound up wearing a lot of different hats during the war. A perfect example of this is the C-87 Liberator Express. They basically took a B-24, ripped out the guns and bomb bays, and turned it into a long-range transport plane. It carried cargo and VIPs over huge distances, and it was a vital lifeline flying supplies over the hump, the Himalayas, into China.
The Navy saw that amazing range too. They adopted the B-24 and called it the PB-40Y-1 Liberator. For them, it was the perfect long-range patrol plane, hunting for submarines and enemy ships across the massive expanses of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans.
And then there was its secret life. Specially modified B-24s, painted jet black, were used by the OSS for top-secret carpetbagger missions. These crews flew low and fast, at night, deep into Nazi-occupied Europe to drop spies and supplies to resistance fighters. It was incredibly dangerous, highly specialized work.
And the bomber itself just kept evolving. The early D model was the first one they made in huge numbers. Then the H model was a massive improvement. It added a powered machine gun turret in the nose to fight off those deadly head-on fighter attacks. And finally, the J model became the classic, the definitive version of the Liberator.
So after all that, what is the B-24's legacy? Well, it's really a story about two things: just staggering quantity and a very specific and very crucial kind of quality.
I mean, the industrial power behind the Liberator was just mind-blowing. Almost half of all B-24s came from just one place: Ford's giant Willow Run factory. At its peak, a brand-new 4-engine heavy bomber was rolling off their assembly line almost every single hour. It was literally the arsenal of democracy in action.
This quote pretty much sums it all up. When you think about the manufacturing, training hundreds of thousands of crewmen, the maintenance, the global logistics, the B-24 represents one of the single biggest industrial and human efforts of the entire 20th century.
Which brings us to our final question. The B-17 might have been more famous, and it was definitely more loved by its crews. But when you look at the sheer numbers, its incredible versatility, and those critical missions that only the B-24 could do, like closing the Atlantic Gap, you have to ask, was the unloved flying Boxcar actually the most valuable heavy bomber of the war? It's a debate that's still going on today.